Overgeneralization and stereotyping are cognitive shortcuts that our brains use to process complex information about the world. Both involve making broad assumptions based on limited or incomplete evidence, but they serve slightly different functions. Overgeneralization occurs when we take a specific instance or a small set of examples and apply it universally, while stereotyping involves assigning a fixed, oversimplified image or idea to an entire group of people, often based on preconceived notions or cultural narratives. While these cognitive shortcuts can help us make quick judgments, they often lead to inaccuracies, biased thinking, and harmful consequences. Overgeneralization causes us to oversimplify the world around us, while stereotyping leads to unfair assumptions about people or groups. Together, they shape the way we interact with others and make sense of social, political, and cultural issues. Overgeneralization and stereotyping are deeply rooted in human psychology and serve as a mental mechanism for organizing the vast amount of information we encounter every day. To understand why overgeneralization and stereotyping are so common, we need to delve into the cognitive mechanisms that drive these forms of thinking. Both are rooted in cognitive biases and heuristics, which are mental shortcuts that allow us to make quick decisions based on limited information. While these shortcuts can be helpful in some situations, they can also lead to flawed conclusions. Humans are naturally wired to seek out patterns and categories in the world around them. Our brains are constantly processing an overwhelming amount of information, and in order to make sense of it all, we rely on cognitive shortcuts that help us organize and categorize things quickly. Overgeneralization is one of these shortcuts, where we take a small piece of information and apply it broadly to everything that seems similar. For example, if you encounter a person from a particular city who behaves rudely, you might overgeneralize and assume that everyone from that city is rude. In reality, this is an oversimplification, but it helps your brain process information quickly by creating a broad rule for how to navigate future encounters. Stereotypes are a specific form of overgeneralization that apply to social groups. They arise when we assign fixed characteristics to an entire group of people based on limited or inaccurate information. Stereotypes often rely on visible characteristics such as race, gender, age, or nationality, and they serve as a mental shortcut to make quick judgments about others. For example, gender stereotypes might suggest that women are more emotional than men, or that men are naturally better at math. These assumptions are not based on individual evidence, but on widely held social beliefs that simplify complex human behaviors into broad generalizations. Stereotypes are a form of social categorization, where we divide people into groups based on shared traits and then assign certain characteristics to those groups. This helps our brains process social information more efficiently, but it can lead to discrimination and bias, as we assume that everyone in a certain group behaves the same way or possesses the same traits. In-group and out-group bias. Overgeneralization and stereotyping are also linked to our innate tendency to divide the world into in-groups and out-groups. In-groups are the groups to which we feel we belong, whether based on nationality, race, religion, or shared interests, while out-groups are composed of people we perceive as different or other. When we engage in stereotyping, we tend to view people in the out-group as more homogeneous, meaning that we assume they are all the same, while we see members of our own in-group as individuals with unique traits. This is known as the out-group homogeneity effect, and it explains why we are more likely to overgeneralize about people who are different from us. For example, someone might stereotype people from a different country as all being lazy, untrustworthy, or aggressive, even though they would never apply such broad generalizations to their own group. This bias makes it easier to justify discriminatory behavior toward outgroups, because we are less likely to see them as individuals with diverse characteristics. Another cognitive bias that reinforces overgeneralization and stereotyping is confirmation bias, which is the tendency to seek out or interpret information in a way that confirms our existing beliefs. Once we hold a stereotype about a group, we are more likely to notice behaviors that fit that stereotype and ignore evidence that contradicts it. For example, if someone believes in the stereotype that teenagers are irresponsible, they might pay more attention to examples of teenagers making poor decisions while ignoring or dismissing instances of responsible behavior. Over time, this selective attention strengthens the stereotype, even though it is not based on an accurate or balanced view of reality. Overgeneralization and stereotyping are not just individual cognitive shortcuts. They are also reinforced by societal structures, institutions, and media. These mental shortcuts play a significant role in shaping social norms, reinforcing power dynamics, and influencing how different groups are treated. Media and cultural reinforcement of stereotypes. The media plays a significant role in perpetuating stereotypes by repeatedly portraying certain groups in oversimplified or exaggerated ways. Television shows, movies, advertisements, and news outlets often rely on stereotypical characters or narratives because they are easy for audiences to understand and relate to. For example, characters from certain racial or ethnic groups may be portrayed in the media as criminals, lazy, or unintelligent, reinforcing negative stereotypes that exist in society. These portrayals shape how people think about and interact with members of those groups, even if they have no personal experience with individuals from those backgrounds. Stereotypical depictions can also be found in gender roles in media. Women are often portrayed as nurturing caregivers, while men are depicted as strong, emotionless providers. These roles reinforce societal expectations about how men and women should behave and limit people's perceptions of what is possible for individuals of different genders. Over time, repeated exposure to these stereotypes in the media normalizes them, making it more likely that people will internalize these oversimplified ideas about others. Education and stereotypes. Educational systems can also reinforce stereotypes, both through the curriculum and through the behavior of teachers and administrators. In some cases, textbooks and classroom materials may present certain groups in stereotypical ways, or omit important historical or cultural contributions from marginalized groups. For example, history lessons that focus primarily on the achievements of white men, while neglecting the contributions of women, people of color, or indigenous populations can create a skewed understanding of history that reinforces stereotypes about who is capable of leadership or innovation. In addition, implicit biases held by educators can lead to different treatment of students based on stereotypes. For instance, teachers may unconsciously assume that boys are better at math and science, leading them to provide more encouragement or opportunities to male students in these subjects. This not only reinforces gender stereotypes, but also limits the potential of students who don't fit the stereotypical mold. Social and political systems. Stereotypes also play a role in shaping social and political systems. Laws, policies, and institutional practices can be influenced by overgeneralization and stereotypes, often leading to unequal treatment of certain groups. For example, racial profiling by law enforcement is often based on stereotypes about the likelihood of individuals from certain racial or ethnic groups engaging in criminal behavior. This overgeneralization leads to the disproportionate targeting of these groups, reinforcing negative perceptions and creating a cycle of inequality. In the political realm, overgeneralization is frequently used in campaign messaging and rhetoric. Politicians may use broad, oversimplified claims about certain groups to rally support or demonize their opponents. This type of rhetoric often relies on stereotypes, creating an us versus them narrative that divides people along racial, religious, or national lines. Chapter 3. The negative consequences of overgeneralization and stereotyping. While overgeneralization and stereotyping might make it easier to process information quickly, they have significant negative consequences for individuals and society as a whole. These cognitive shortcuts contribute to discrimination, inequality, and social tension. Discrimination and prejudice. One of the most harmful consequences of stereotyping is its role in perpetuating discrimination and prejudice. When we rely on stereotypes to make judgments about people, we are more likely to treat them unfairly based on preconceived notions rather than assessing them as individuals. For example, racial stereotypes about certain groups being more prone to crime can lead to racial profiling by law enforcement, where individuals from those groups are disproportionately stopped, searched, or arrested. Similarly, gender stereotypes about women being less capable in leadership roles can result in gender discrimination in the workplace, where women are passed over for promotions or leadership opportunities. These forms of discrimination have long-lasting impacts on individuals and communities, reinforcing cycles of inequality and limiting people's opportunities to succeed based on their true abilities and potential. Self-fulfilling prophecies. Stereotyping can also create self-fulfilling prophecies, where individuals internalize the stereotypes that others hold about them and begin to behave in ways that confirm those stereotypes. This phenomenon occurs when people's expectations about a group influence their interactions with members of that group, ultimately causing the stereotyped behavior to manifest. For example, if a teacher believes that boys are better at math than girls, they may give male students more attention and encouragement in math class. As a result, boys may perform better in math, while girls may become discouraged and underperform. Over time, this reinforces the stereotype that boys are naturally better at math, even though the difference in performance was caused by unequal treatment, not inherent ability. Social division and conflict. Overgeneralization and stereotyping contribute to social division and conflict by creating an us versus them mentality. When we view people from different groups as fundamentally different from ourselves, it becomes easier to justify treating them unfairly or excluding them from certain opportunities. For example, national or ethnic stereotypes can fuel xenophobia, where people from one country or ethnic group are viewed as dangerous or inferior. This leads to policies that discriminate against immigrants or minority groups and creates an atmosphere of hostility and suspicion. Stereotypes also contribute to polarization in political discourse. When politicians and media outlets rely on oversimplified narratives about certain groups, it becomes harder for people to engage in constructive dialogue or find common ground. This deepens social divides and makes it more difficult to address complex issues in a meaningful way. Limiting personal growth and opportunity. Overgeneralization and stereotyping not only harm those who are stereotyped, but they also limit the growth and understanding of those who hold these beliefs. When we rely on stereotypes, we miss out on the richness and complexity of individuals and the diverse experiences they bring. For example, gender stereotypes that suggest women are naturally suited for caregiving roles may discourage men from pursuing careers in nursing or teaching, limiting their career opportunities. Similarly, racial stereotypes about intelligence or aptitude may cause employers to overlook talented candidates simply because they don't fit the stereotypical image of success. By reducing people to simplified categories, overgeneralization and stereotyping prevent us from recognizing the full potential of individuals and lead to missed opportunities for personal and societal growth. Overgeneralization and stereotyping are not just abstract cognitive processes. They are reinforced in our everyday lives through language, behavior, and social norms. From casual conversations to institutional practices, these mental shortcuts are constantly being reinforced, often without us realizing it. Stereotyping in everyday language. Language is, well, a powerful tool for shaping how we think about and categorize the world. Stereotypes are often embedded in the everyday language we use, reinforcing oversimplified ideas about different groups. For example, phrases like "boys will be boys" or "women are so emotional" reflect and reinforce gender stereotypes. These statements overgeneralize individual behavior, reducing complex human experiences to simplified, gendered traits. Similarly, racial or ethnic stereotypes are often perpetuated through jokes, idioms, or offhand comments. Phrases like "you're so smart for an ethnic group" or "he's such a typical nationality" might seem harmless on the surface, but they reinforce the idea that certain traits are inherent to particular groups. Implicit bias in social interactions. Stereotypes also shape our everyday social interactions, often through implicit bias, unconscious attitudes or beliefs that influence how we perceive and interact with others. Implicit bias can affect how we judge people's abilities, trustworthiness, or worthiness based on stereotypical assumptions, even if we don't consciously believe in those stereotypes. For example, studies have shown that employers are more likely to hire candidates whose names sound white or male, even when those candidates have identical qualifications to those with names that suggest a different race or gender. This kind of implicit bias leads to unequal treatment and perpetuates the stereotypes that certain groups are more capable or deserving of success. Reinforcement through social norms. Social norms and expectations also play a role in reinforcing overgeneralization and stereotyping. From a young age, we are socialized to fit into certain roles or categories based on our gender, race, or cultural background. These roles are often shaped by stereotypes, and stepping outside of these norms can lead to social consequences. For example, boys who enjoy traditionally feminine activities or girls who excel in sports may face teasing or social rejection because they don't fit the stereotypical mold. This pressure to conform to stereotypes can limit people's ability to explore their interests and talents freely. Social norms also influence how we treat others based on stereotypes. For instance, someone might unconsciously offer less help to a woman in a professional setting, assuming she is less capable of handling a task than a male colleague. These small, everyday interactions reinforce broader societal stereotypes about gender roles and abilities. Chapter 5. How to recognize and resist overgeneralization and stereotyping. Overgeneralization and stereotyping are deeply ingrained in human thinking, but they are not inevitable. By becoming more aware of these mental shortcuts and actively challenging them, we can reduce their negative impact on our interactions and decision-making. Recognizing overgeneralization and stereotyping. The first step in resisting overgeneralization and stereotyping is recognizing when we are engaging in these cognitive shortcuts. Here are some signs that you might be overgeneralizing or relying on stereotypes, making broad assumptions. If you find yourself making sweeping statements like all group are trait, you are likely engaging in overgeneralization. Basing judgments on limited information, if your opinion about a group or individual is based on one or two examples, you may be overgeneralizing or relying on stereotypes. Using stereotypes to explain behavior. If you attribute someone's actions to their membership in a group rather than their individual choices, you might be falling into the trap of stereotyping. Challenging your assumptions. Once you've recognized overgeneralization or stereotyping in your thinking, it's important to challenge those assumptions. Ask yourself, is this assumption based on facts or just a stereotype? Look for evidence that supports or contradicts your assumptions. Are you relying on a widely held stereotype? Or have you considered the individual's unique characteristics and experiences? Am I giving this person the benefit of the doubt? Consider whether you are treating people as individuals or reducing them to a simplified category based on their group membership. What would happen if I saw this person as an individual? Think about how your interactions and decisions might change if you focused on the person's unique traits rather than relying on stereotypes. Seeking diverse perspectives. One of the best ways to combat overgeneralization and stereotyping is to actively seek out diverse perspectives. By exposing yourself to people, cultures, and ideas that are different from your own, you can broaden your understanding of the world and reduce the tendency to rely on mental shortcuts. For example, if you hold stereotypes about a certain racial or ethnic group, try to learn more about their history, culture, and individual experiences. Engaging with diverse viewpoints can help you see beyond the stereotypes and appreciate the complexity of human behavior. Practicing empathy and openness. Finally, cultivating empathy and openness is key to resisting overgeneralization and stereotyping. When we approach others with empathy, we are more likely to see them as individuals with unique experiences, rather than reducing them to stereotypes. By being open to learning and understanding new perspectives, we can break free from the limitations of overgeneralization and create more meaningful, respectful interactions with those around us. Conclusion: overcoming the limitations of simplified thinking. Overgeneralization and stereotyping are common cognitive shortcuts that help us process information quickly, but they often lead to biased thinking and harmful consequences. While these mental shortcuts are deeply ingrained in human psychology, we are not powerless to change them. By recognizing when we are engaging in overgeneralization or stereotyping, challenging our assumptions, seeking out diverse perspectives, and practicing empathy, we can reduce the negative impact of these cognitive biases in our everyday lives. When we treat people as individuals rather than categories, we open the door to more meaningful connections and a more just and equitable society. In a world where social, political, and cultural divisions are often reinforced by stereotypes, it's more important than ever to resist the temptation to oversimplify. By embracing complexity and diversity, we can build a world that values people for who they truly are, rather than reducing them to simplified ideas based on limited information.
Remember to like and subscribe for more video content. Sapiens quae vigilat.